Welcome to another Third Apron podcast. I am your host, Yossi Goslin, here again with my co-host, Sam Quinn. Happy New Year's, everybody. Our first recording of the year. And we are going to get into a couple things. Later in the episode, we'll do some predictions, more so like stuff that we predict we'll make predictions in the short term, near term, and further term. That's kind of how it's going to go. And before we get into that, we're going to talk more about Michael Porter Jr. It's not going to be like a fully fleshed type of who says no, like we've done with other players like Anthony Davis or Giannis Antetokounmpo. We did talk about Michael Porter Jr. extensively recently in the Atlantic Division podcast, but I think he's starting to get a bigger market with his recent play, and I think it's worth getting into that and more. So it's been 6 months since Michael Porter Jr. was traded by the Nuggets with a first-round pick to the Brooklyn Nets, and many thought that the Nuggets were getting an upgrade. Cameron Johnson was playing a lot better than Michael Porter Jr. He had a career year, and seems like it's the other way around instead. Cam, he struggled a little early on with the Nuggets, started to catch on recently until his knee injury, but Michael Porter Jr. is having a career year. He's averaging highs across the board. He's shooting 41% from three off 9 attempts per game. He might be an all-star. And then like the competition, I haven't really gone sifted through my selections, but he's definitely up there, especially after the month the Nets had. He helped lead them to 7-4 in December. Obviously, he's not the reason they had such a great defense, but he was a part of a Nets team that had the best defense in December. So he's going to be one of the biggest names ahead of the trade deadline. So yesterday we got some reporting by Jake Fisher on the Stein line about the league-wide interest in him. And he highlighted a couple teams like the Warriors, Bulls, Pistons, also the Bucks, which I think we both agree is probably a little crazy right now. On Third Apron Substack, I uploaded earlier today a post about the Michael Porter Jr. trade on both sides, what the Nuggets still need to do, because now that trade was mostly so they can keep everyone else on the roster, but with the way Peyton Watson's playing ahead of restricted free agency, there's going to be some challenges there. But also I got a little into what the Nets could get, what his extension would probably look like, because that's the other big variable if he gets traded. So Sam, any thoughts on all that before we get into any fake trades? Like I said, we're not going to get too into these.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Michael Porter Jr. in the last, I don't even want to say last couple of weeks, like really all season. I think this is a really interesting case because it's another one of those OKC situations where you get value coming in and value going out. And I now wonder if this is going to become a model for other teams where they say like the best use of cap space is taking in a good player on a bloated contract with the idea that you can maybe resuscitate their value a little bit, like the Thunder did with Chris Paul and with Al Horford, and now the Nets are doing with Michael Porter Jr., and then trading that guy for value on the way out as the contract is a little bit shorter. I wonder if this is going to be the start of that sort of trend. But Porter has kind of become one of the most interesting players of this year's deadline. He's obviously expensive, but when you compare his contract to like the Lowry Markkanens of the world, taking in $40 million with 1 year left after this is a lot easier than taking in $50 million with 4 years left or 3 years left. There are teams that, like, especially the one that I'm going to bring up, can match Michael Porter Jr., but have a much harder time matching somebody similar, even if they're just making another 5-10 million more. He fits on any team, obviously. We know his role can scale up or down. He's just a very, very interesting trade candidate. So I think, to be clear, we're doing like our prediction of the trade that's going to happen, right? Like the Who Says No we're doing is the one that we think is likeliest to happen.
Well, I kind of picked just something what I would consider my favorite trade as of now. But before we even get into that, let's just kind of talk about if we even think a trade will happen. Because
Yossi, we both think a trade is going to happen.
Well, then you haven't been paying attention to me the last time I think we did it. I said I don't know, because the Nets, they have had such high prices for all their top players that they've been very patient, willing to hold their top guys out. And in terms of getting optimal value for their guys, they did it with Mikal Bridges, despite lots of speculation that he could be traded ahead of the 2024 trade deadline. And then they ended up getting a haul for him. Cam Johnson was available all last season, and they held on to him and got a really great trade return, as we can see, for him in the offseason. So the one time they got a massive haul midseason, they traded Kevin Durant. They got 4 firsts as well as Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson. You and I both agree Michael Porter Jr. doesn't have that type of value, but the Nets have shown a willingness to remain patient and hold on to their price because they're more likely to get it in the offseason. So there could be a team desperate enough to pay whatever that price is now, but if it's not met, the Nets will happily hold on to him.
Okay, let me counter that. There are a couple of key differences this time versus the way it's been in the past. The biggest is Michael Porter Jr. is such an injury risk with a history of back injuries that, like, if the wrong thing happens tomorrow, all of these good vibes disappear in a snap. Like, he is a time bomb. I hope that he manages to stay healthy, but just the reality with back injuries is that they're such a risk that I don't think you can afford to hold on to him. I don't think they have quite as much equity with Michael Porter Jr. as they did with like Mikal Bridges, who they thought could be like the secondary star to the more famous guy that they got. Like, they had visions of keeping Michael Porter Jr. for a decade, or that rather, they had visions of keeping Mikal Bridges for a decade. I don't think that's the case with Michael Porter Jr. I think that the last part of this too is like they are so leveraged to tank this year with not having a pick next year. Like, if you're gonna keep him, like if you don't trade him at the deadline, you might as well have him on next year's team because you have no incentive to lose next year. I just think like what they're doing right now is pumping up the market, trying to generate the most value possible so that they can get rid of him, get a haul back, or get the most that you can get back during the season, and then tank like crazy for 2 months, try to get one of these top 3 picks, which you paid a premium for the chance to do. I'm sorry you wasted those Suns picks and that Maverick pick if you don't do that, and then try to jump back into being competitive in the offseason when you have all of this cap space coming. So, like, I think it would be kind of malpractice and under all those circumstances to keep him.
So let's talk about them, because you brought up a couple of good things. One, yeah, his value, again, he's not gonna get that type of value that Mikal Bridges got, but he does have some baggage. One is the injuries. Last year he struggled in the playoffs with that shoulder injury, really hampered him, and he's got those back injuries, multiple surgeries, so he could fall apart at any time. Uh, there's some other stuff, like stuff, when it comes to opinions podcasting, that might rub teams the wrong way. So there's definitely a lot of things that could hamper his trade value. So instead of him being like a 3 or 4 first round pick guy, I kind of peg him as probably like a 2 first round pick worth of value guy. What do you think?
I'd say more like one good one or like 1.5, but there are all sorts of circumstances that go into this. Like, are the Nets taking back bad money to do this trade? Because that is worth some value. Are they trading with a particular desperate a suitor rather? I think that could raise his value. Like, there are worlds in which I think he could return 2 first round picks. I peg his value, given all of the risk involved, at more like one good pick.
So, so I think we're pretty close. Seems like, yeah. Whether it's one good pick or one plus a crappy one, which, spoiler, actually, that's kind of what my trade is: one good one so and so pick. So, I I would imagine that, I want to say the Nets probably know that. I think they probably know they're not going to get the world for him, but I think they have to stick to a certain price. If they feel like they could get maybe 3 in the trade deadline, they could settle for 2 in the offseason, then so be it. Because right now he's playing probably the best he might ever play in his career. He might never replicate this. The other thing to keep in mind is that he's not going to replicate this on another team, because he's not going to be the first option elsewhere. If another good team is trading for him, like the Pistons, for example, he's going to at most be the second option. If the Warriors bring him in, same thing, he'll be a second or third option at times. So that's another thing to keep in mind, that a team, no one's going to give up the type of value that his stat line would team. But the one other benefit of trading for him early is to figure out his contract because, and this might be worth paying an extra pick for. So when the Knicks traded for Mikal Bridges, they got him with 2 years left on his contract. They got to play him for a full year, and then he was extension eligible last offseason, and they got him on what I thought at the time was a really team friendly deal. A lot of people at the time thought that was an overpay for Bridges because he didn't play quite as well as you would hope for the Knicks. And now he's playing again. Now he's back to playing some of his best basketball with the Knicks, and that contract's looking like a steal. So if you're another team and you really believe Michael Porter Jr. is not necessarily the final piece to being a contender or anything like that, but a major part of what could be a sustainable playoff team, might as well bring him in as early as you can, establish him into whatever role that he's going to be, whether it's a second or third option, and then you can really get an edge on negotiations because next year he's going to be extension eligible as an expiring contract. So the earlier you could bring him in, I think the better you can get a deal on him that makes sense. Right now he's making $38 million. He's going to make $40 million next year. I don't think he's going to be making that on his next contract as well as he's been playing. When you look at that Mikal Bridges contract, that 4 for $150, I think that's kind of like somewhat of a good baseline to start off of. I'm not saying he should get more, but just that's like a marker for other teams in terms of, okay, what is some really good third, fourth option money? So that's the other thing that if you can bring him in, you want to bring him in with the understanding that you're going to get him on an extension that makes sense. And in that case, it might be worth to pay a little extra if that helps him help you get him on such a deal.
Well, yeah, I mean, is he going to be picky about where he wants to go is the other part of this. And it's a weird situation for him where it seems like going from Denver, which is basketball nirvana, to Brooklyn, a team that was tanking, was like much more desirable for him because he wanted to be in a situation where he was going to have the ball a lot. Does he want to play for a contender? Does he want to play in certain cities? That's going to be something that is really interesting to play out. We really don't know what he wants. He's more in that Jeremy Grant camp where having the ball might be more important than being on a winner. What kind of cities does he want? We really don't know. So that's another layer to put on top of this. But like, let's stop dancing around it. What's your trade?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say I don't think he's going to have that much control over everything. Given everything, his injury history, I think if like you got to capitalize off this season and get the best deal you can in an extension now, because you never know. Maybe an injury hits next year, and then that money's gone. So we know of each other's trades. I think I'll go first. I think yours is a little better. A little like in terms of what people would want to see happen. I don't think people would like to see what I've got happening. So I've got Jonathan Kuminga going to the Chicago Bulls. So last year, there was the reporting around the time when the Nuggets were looking to be interested in bringing in Zach LaVine that, okay, who would be the guy going out? Well, it's got to be Michael Porter Jr. Who else is going to make the money work? Arturas Karnisovas, the vice, he runs the front office of the Bulls, previously with the Nuggets. So there is some familiarity there. And I could see the Bulls deciding, hey, you know what? We're looking to trade Kobe White. We could use if we're going to send him out, we need another shooter back. We'd like a big one. I like Michael Porter Jr. now that he's playing this well. Why not we try to work something out? So here's a trade I put together. Here we go, showing up nicely. So the Michael Porter Jr. goes to the Chicago Bulls, the three-teamer involving the Hawks and the Nets. The Hawks will receive Kobe White and Patrick Williams. Kobe White is a guy that we have both talked about as a type of target the Hawks should pursue to replace Trae Young. And the Nets, they bring in Trae Young, and in return, they also get that 2 first-round picks. One from the Hawks, it's going to be the worst first-round pick that they have. Most likely, it's going to be the Cavs pick, which should be in like the late teens, early 20s. And then here's the crappy first-round pick, the Blazers lottery-protected one, which I'm starting to feel a little more doubtful on the Blazers playoff chances. I was very high on them even while Drew was out, but now there's just no sign of his return. So who says no, Sam?
I think the it's I think the Bulls probably do it just because I think they like the idea of getting their high level power forward for one first round pick. And I don't want to say not a valuable one, but not one of their own. And I think their own picks tend to be pretty valuable. That Portland pick, I think the Nets would love to get their hands on that because they would love to be able to exert leverage over Portland if in 2028 that pick still hasn't conveyed and the Blazers are panicking because there are Buck swap rights attached, and you can't risk those. So I think there's some supplementary value out of that pick. I don't think the Hawks would want Patrick Williams. Like to them, I think like if they're trading for Kobe White, I think the idea is we're going to have a 25 to 30 million dollar point guard instead of a 50 million dollar point guard. But if it comes attached to Patrick Williams' albatross contract, and I don't know how much Patrick Williams would really play for them, I don't really know what the benefit for them is. So I would lean no, especially with them giving up a first round pick. And Brooklyn, I mean, I don't think they have any interest in Trae Young. I think their young guys all need the ball in their hand. And like, by the way, their rookies are like looking pretty good. None of them are standing out. So we're not doing the Derek Queen mea culpa that we did for New Orleans. But like Jemin is pretty good and Danny Wolf has something. And like I like these rookies and I want to continue to see them grow with the ball in their hands. I think having them watch Trae Young dribble just doesn't really make sense for anybody. So I think ultimately the Nets would probably say Young. I think they would rather go for one high value pick than two kind of meh picks like this. And I think the Hawks probably lean no too, but I think Chicago would do it. And I do think there is a construction that's a little bit simpler where Brooklyn and Chicago get together and maybe Brooklyn takes back the Patrick Williams contract if needed, and they get a Bulls pick in that. I think Porter to Chicago is a workable construction. I think the Atlanta side of this kind of complicates it.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think now that I think about it, I think the Hawks are probably giving up too much value. If they like, do you
Yeah.
think they could conceivably just swap Trae Young for Kobe White?
I don't see why the Bulls would do that, honestly.
No, no,
Like
no. In like a bigger, like this is a multi-team trade. Let's say, like, well, okay, you know what? The maybe Patrick Williams would go to the Nets, and then in that case, the the Nets will need first round value for that. In which case, the Hawks still need to give up that first, and
right.
then so I think the value is then yeah you're saving money off Trey's contract. You don't have to take on any extra money. You for sure have to give up some type of first, maybe give up some seconds as well. But let me ask you this about the Nets part. So you don't, I understand, yeah, they still have all these guards that they're looking to develop, but you don't think they, like the same way they brought in Porter Jr. as a flyer veteran, they could look to rehabilitate his value. You don't think they'd be interested in trying to do the same thing with Trey?
Well, the difference is that Porter is a forward and Trey is a high usage guard. And what do we talk about on every episode of the show? Nobody wants guards. Now, could they look at this and be like, maybe we can sucker Sacramento in a few months? Possibly, but like if that's on the table, I don't know why the Hawks wouldn't just do that, right? Like I think if the Hawks could just trade Trey Young for expiring contracts, they'd probably do it and then just try to sign Kobe White outright in free agency and not have to give up a pick to make this whole exchange work. I think it's just you don't want to play musical chairs with the guards right now. There's so little interest in the guards at that price point that you're worried that you might risk being like stuck when the music stops with the guard that nobody wants. I don't think they want to risk a year and a half of stunning the development of their young guys for the sake of bringing in Trae Young.
Okay. All right. So there's definitely something there. There's definitely a way it could be recalibrated. I just wouldn't sleep on the Bulls with because of that link that this can be something that happens. Um, but I think we can all agree. I don't think anybody wants to see that. I think they'd like to see Michael Porter Jr. go to like 25 other teams, most likely. All right. I will load up your trade. Go ahead and explain it.
Yeah, I think Golden State is the team that makes the most sense. I think they're the most desperate, frankly. Like, remember last year at the deadline when all we were hearing is they're offering for every star in the league. They so badly want to get an impact player. They want to be competitive down the stretch for Steph. It's just so hard for them because the guys like Anthony Davis or Giannis are so expensive financially that they'd have to give up either Jimmy Butler or Draymond Green to make the money work. The advantage with Michael Porter Jr. is that you could do that while keeping Jimmy and Draymond and like setting yourself up to have a really nice starting closing five. So the trade that I came up with would send Michael Porter Jr. and Keon Ellis to the Warriors. The Kings would get Jonathan Kuminga, and they would then send Malik Monk to the Nets along with Moses Moody and Buddy Hield, and the Nets would get 2 first-round picks from Golden State. We know Golden State loves, or rather, we know Brooklyn loves those deep future first-round picks. So we'll give them 2032 from the Warriors, and then we'll also give them 2026, which could be like a mid first-round pick depending on how this goes. But then if you're the Warriors, like you have this really organic, nice closing five of Steph, Keon Ellis, Jimmy Butler, Michael Porter Jr., and Draymond Green that has a lot of shooting, a lot of defense, like really good on both sides of the ball. That's a pretty dangerous team. And yeah, you're out your 2032 first, but you figure Steph and Draymond and Jimmy are all going to retire in like 28, 29, something like that. So you would have a few years where you could tank and try to rebuild organically before that pick comes home to roost, which I think they're going to want to do. I don't think they're going to want to like desperately try to rebuild on the fly by trading 3 first-round picks for a star. So I think it makes sense for all parties involved. Yeah, the Nets are taking on some long-term money with Moody and with Monk, but they get 2 first-round picks. They still have a fair bit of cap flexibility. And for the Kings, it's obvious. Like, you're just getting Jonathan Kuminga for Malik Monk, who you wanted to trade for him anyway. And you wanted to get off that contract. And Keon Ellis, who you're going to lose in free agency anyway. Like, you're just getting the guy you wanted all along. It's kind of a no-brainer to me.
So I think the Nets absolutely do that. That's a lot of value for Michael Porter Jr. The second first round pick, and even getting a guy like Moses Moody, he's a guy I could see not like exploding at the level of some of the other guys in recent years for the Nets, but he could really improve his value there and even be a fit on the next good Nets team. So I think the Nets absolutely do that. The Kings, they've been trying to do this trade. Yeah, now it's a little different with Keon Ellis's inclusion, but I forgot. Are they even trading a first in this trade?
No,
they're
the
not.
value the value they're giving up is Keon Ellis. Like
So
the reason the
yeah,
Warriors are giving up 2 first-round picks is because they're not just getting Michael Porter Jr., they're also getting Keon Ellis.
like in this case, we all know Jonathan Kuminga doesn't have positive value, but Malik Monk has less value than Jonathan Kuminga. So yeah, you got to give up a little something, and if that something's Keon Ellis, who
They're going to lose.
They might not be able to keep anyways. Okay, so be it. You get your guy. The Warriors, I think it's a little tricky. I think if Porter Jr. was making a little less money, then I think it's a little more feasible because I think and I think a lot of people would disagree, but between trading Kuminga, Moody, and Hield, I think most people would be like, okay, like the Warriors will probably survive going from this 3-for-1. Hield is not even like playing the rotation every night, as is Kuminga. I would want to try to keep Moody if I'm the Warriors, just because they're already like their main shooters are Curry and Moody, especially with Hield not playing. I would want to add Porter Jr. on top of that, so that's kind of hard because of the money he makes. But I think that's lesser of an issue than the value because
Can I make a counter to that?
Go ahead.
They save 2.6 million in this and they open up a roster spot. Go sign a shooter on the buyout market. You can't get an above mid-level shooter, but you do have a roster spot, and you can find somebody you can come in and make some shots. And you have so much defensively with Ellis now and Draymond and Butler, and they have enough defensively that like you could support just bringing somebody in who's going to make shots and do nothing else.
So, but I think the bigger issue is just the value. Those are like the 1 first-round pick, the 26. Okay, that's probably after doing this trade, going to get the Warriors in the playoffs. Should be in the late teens, early 20s. Yeah, they probably got to give up a little something else, but I think I'm being a little higher on Moody in this case, where I think between the 2 picks and Moody, that's probably appropriate value for Porter Jr., but I feel like for the Warriors, it's a little much. I don't know if they want to give up all that. I think ideally they're trying to just trade 1 first, but
let me pitch something then.
But I think we're close.
What if the Nets included Houston's first round pick next year? So they get the two Warriors picks, one of which is the 32, which is very valuable, and another is going to be in the teens this year. But they get Houston's first round. Golden State gets Houston's first round pick back, which is going to be like number 26 next year.
I think there's a lot of ways, yeah, like a pick swap like that can help
Yeah.
get it closer to the finish line. So I think I'm more so looking at it from the lens of Golden State's point of view, where they're probably gonna come at this and say, it's a little too much value. How can we make it a little? How can we make it a little more palatable? But I think it's pretty close. I think we both have pretty close deals.
Yeah, I think both of
Yeah.
these basic frame, like Porter to the Nets and Porter to the Warriors, are both pretty feasible frameworks. Case in point, they were
Yeah.
both in the reporting.
So Sam, though, ultimately predicts 100% chance that Porter Jr. gets traded, or would you want to give a smaller percentage?
95. Like, I don't know, stuff happens, but I think he's going to get traded.
So 95% chance from Sam. I'm going to keep it even, 50%. I'm much lower.
All right, we are back, and our next segment, it's New Year's Day, or rather, it was New Year's Day when we conceived this. It is now January 2nd. And we're going to try to start a new annual tradition at the Third Apron podcast, where every New Year's Day, we are going to make predictions for 1 year out, 2 years out, and 3 years out. And then hopefully we can then revisit these predictions each New Year's Day or January 2nd or whenever we get around to recording it. So the basic premise here is for your prediction to be accurate 1 year out, whatever your prediction is, needs to be true as of January 1st, 2027. 2 years out, January 1st, 2028. 3 years out, January 1st, 2029. So I will get us started. My first prediction, my 1 year prediction, on January 1st, 2027, LeBron James will be a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Why do I think this is going to be the case? Here's the way I think this is going to play out. I think the Lakers, their season is going to come to an end relatively quickly in the postseason. I think they'll be a top 6 seed, likely number 5 or number 6 in the West. I'm going to say number 5 because Denver losing Jokic and losing all of their other starters for so long, it's going to hurt them in the regular season. But I think they'll be number 5. I think they will lose in the first round relatively comfortably, or for their sake, uncomfortably. And I think the Lakers will have the revelation that it no longer makes sense for them to be in the LeBron James business, at least at the price that he will see fit. I think they are going to go into this offseason with an idea that we have 3 first-round picks and $55 million in cap space. Let's re-sign Austin Reeves and devote the rest of our resources either A, to signing defense-first, athletic, younger role players, or B, trading for another all-star who's more on Luka and Austin's timeline. I do not think they are interested in bringing LeBron James back at any sort of substantial price. Do I think they would be open to it at maybe $10 million? Yes, but I think that would be so awkward and frankly disrespectful to a player of LeBron's stature that he wouldn't want to do that. I think LeBron will want to do a few things. Number one, he'll want to finish his career on a team where he thinks he can win. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers qualify. As uneven as this season has been, they are incredibly talented. Number two, I think he will want to set himself up for the sort of retirement tour that he feels he deserves. I think the disrespect of the Lakers not wanting to pay him a lot of money will make that last season in LA awkward. I think the Lakers are ready to move on. If he goes back to Cleveland, I think he will be celebrated to the degree that I think he wants to be. And last but not least, I think he wants to feel wanted, like we all do, but like a player of his caliber, frankly, deserves. I think this awkward situation with the Lakers, where it is so clearly Luka's team now and Austin Reeves' team even more than his, is just not the way LeBron wants to go out. I think he wants to have unanimous approval from his fan base. I think he looks at the idea of taking the minimum to return to Cleveland, even if only for 1 year, as kind of a way to A, bookend his career and say, I started in Cleveland, I'm ending in Cleveland. Cleveland is my number one fan base more than any other team. That's where I want to be remembered. I'm giving myself that legacy more than anything. And I think it's the storybook ending that he would want. And then he gets to act magnanimous by saying, I took the minimum to come here. Look at me being generous because Cleveland means so much more to me than anything else. When I think the truth is, There isn't a cap space team out there that's going to throw 30, $40 million at LeBron James next year. I don't think that team exists. So I think really he's not going to have as many options as he certainly has had in the past or maybe would expect. I think going back to Cleveland for the minimum is not going to maybe be the best overall financial offer that he gets. But I think when you factor in the basketball side of it and the sentimentality, it's going to be the only move that makes sense. So, Yossi, on January 1st, 2027, LeBron James will be a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Do you agree with me or not?
I think there's a very strong chance. I don't know if I can say as confidently as you that that's what will happen because there's still a lot of time. I think we're both in agreement that LeBron will not continue being a Laker after this season. I think the Lakers are ready to move on. So that really whittles down his options. Earlier this week, I did the Warriors trade deadline episode with Richu, and in it I got into the idea about, well, if the Warriors are trying to get Anthony Davis, and right now it seems like they're not really into it, but as we get closer to the trade deadline, they're probably I think they'll look more into it. And if you're clutch, maybe you want to try to package LeBron as well, because that would probably be the last. A trade now would probably be LeBron's last chance at getting somewhat of a meaningful payday because he's not going to get a max contract next year. But let's say the Warriors are interested in bringing in AD, and if it means bringing in LeBron, okay, you lose Jimmy Butler, but instead of paying him 50 something $million a year, maybe you get LeBron at like 25 to 30. Like if LeBron really wants to get to a situation that's competitive that also will pay him, that's the kind of thing that has to maneuver. But there's a lot of variables that need to happen for that to go down. So the Cavs solution is a lot simpler. He would just go there most likely for the minimum unless they can miraculously get below the second apron over the next 6 months or so, which is probably pretty unlikely. So I would say that that the Cavs, what you're proposing him back to the Cavs, probably a little more likely than what I'm proposing. So it's very possible. I would say, maybe like 40% chance, over 40% chance something like that happens.
Well, I'm going to dispute the Warriors thing a little bit. I think this is quietly an important part of LeBron's legacy. I don't think he wants to play for a fourth team. I think, frankly, if we're being honest with each other,
fifth team.
Yeah, exactly. It would be a fifth team because the Cavs, the first stint, and the third stint are different teams fundamentally. He doesn't want to change team. I think if he changes teams to Cleveland, he can play the "I played for three teams" card. Whereas we know in reality it would be no. It's more like you played for five teams. I think LeBron cares about that from a legacy standpoint. Whereas putting on a fourth uniform would be that's something that starts to drag down your legacy a little bit, even if you're doing it at the age of 41. So that's why I think the Warriors thing is off the table. Do you have anything more you want to say on LeBron, or you want to go on to yours?
Well, there's option 3, which is just retirement. And I think, let's say, look, I'll put it this way. If, let's say the Cavs, going back to the Cavs is like a 40% chance, going to another team like the Warriors is like a 20% chance, I would say then that him retiring probably has like a pretty equal chance as him going back to Cleveland. Because if he truly
we both agree Lakers is 0.
Like 5%. Like they're like they'd have to really
they're the least likely option.
I think it's I think we're agreement on that. I just think if he really cares about his legacy that much, there's a case that just retiring as soon as possible and not adding a fifth team, even a third stint with the Cavs, even though that's still the same team. There could be people looking at it, oh, he went there for the minimum and they won a championship or went to the finals. There might be people trying to knock him for that down the line. If he really cares about that thing, then maybe he should just retire, call it a career. So I think there is some value to that as well. All right. So here is I'll go to mine now. My prediction 1 year out. Let me load it up. Okay. So about 10 years ago, we saw the NBA start to swing so far against big men. A lot of it had to do with the rise of the Warriors and how to match up with them. We saw a guy like Brook Lopez have to settle for almost the minimum in 2018. That was like the peak low of the value of big men in the NBA. Roy Hibbert went from being a very good above average starting big man to out of the league within a couple of years. So now over the past 10 years, the league has like recalibrated where they said, okay, here are the attributes that we need in a big man. And as time has progressed, I think the NBA has kind of sifted through the types of bigs it wants. And I think there's kind of a balance now. So there's now a lot more size and like whatever qualities that were like undesirable back then, I think they've kind of been weeded out. Now we're starting to see the opposite trend against guards. I think the league is starting to shift against smaller guards. As talented as they may be offensively, for more bigger and physical lineup, we're starting to see that mainly with the rise of the Thunder. I think the 2024 Celtics also have something to do with that, where none of these teams have any weak links with their best five lineups. And now we're starting to see the Rockets try to replicate that as best they could. You could argue the Wolves are trying to do that right now. So I think now more teams want to like eliminate having a weak link in their best lineup. And I wonder what that's going to mean in the short term for some of these guards that we've been talking about, such as Trae Young. There's a couple others, but my prediction is I think this offseason is going to be a peak low for what guys like this are going to get in extensions or in contracts. I would say like this summer, and then it might even carry over to next summer. Any thoughts on that, Sam?
I think you have to make a direct prediction because we have to be able to calibrate if you're right or wrong. So,
Yeah.
like, give a notable player and give a salary number.
Okay, so I can't really predict Trae Young because he's got that player option. He's probably going to pick it up, and maybe by next year, the league will start to maybe bounce more towards him. But I wouldn't be shocked if what if he only gets like between 25 to 30 million dollars on the next contract, in which case it'd be a short-term deal if he were to accept something like that so he can try to build it up later. But you never know, maybe the league starts to really get more into this trend where a guy like Trae is not going to get paid as much because teams aren't going to want to depend on him to start and close every game. Again, this is like very far out thinking for now, but with him, that's just like a basic prediction. That's more of a 2-year prediction. But let's get into something a little more like into the offseason. So here's some of the guards that are going to be free agents this offseason who may be impacted by what I'm saying. You've got guys like, I'm not going to count Reeves or Harden or Kobe White. I think they're going to be fine. But once you start to get to role players or like below average starting level guards, I'm talking about guys like Anthony Simons, guys like Cam Thomas, Colin Sexton. I'm kind of concerned about these guys. I'm kind of concerned about the type of money that might be out there this summer. There is a lot of more cap space than last offseason. But the other thing to keep in mind, guard is the most saturated position in the league. The reason why a guy like Trae Young and some of these other all-star level guards like John Morant, LaMelo Ball don't have a market is because teams are set at guard. And the only team who might have cap space this summer who needs a veteran guard, there's like the Clippers potentially if they want to move on from Harden. You brought up maybe the Wizards would want to take a chance on one of the top guards on a short-term deal. It's not looking great for these guys. So my prediction then, to make an official prediction, I could see I think one of these guys will get the minimum this summer.
Okay, let's get even crazier. Like, could it be both? Like, could Sexton and Simons both be minimum players? I don't think that's crazy at all because you look at the last few years, Gary Trent Jr. went from like 20 something million down to the minimum. Tyus Jones went from consistently making mid-level money down to the minimum in the theoretical primes of their career. Like, if you told me both Sexton and Simons were cap room mid-level, or not even that, like tax mid-level or minimum, I would actually totally buy that. I think it's a good prediction. I think you're ahead of the curve on this. The other thing that I was kind of wondering about is you were talking about Brook Lopez. Is there going to be a guard like Brook Lopez that totally transforms the way that they play as a response to this
Yes.
sort of shift in the league. Like I'm sitting here wondering what that even looked like. There's been like the small example that I can kind of think of is Dennis Smith Jr. going from a lottery pick, starting point guard, high usage, theoretical guy. It never materialized, but that was the hope for his career, turning into this awesome defender when he made it back to the NBA. I'm like, could Ja Morant reapply his athleticism to being a great defender or something like that instead of being this super high usage rim attacking guard? Or I don't know. I do wonder if we're going to get the guard equivalent to what Brook Lopez did. I'm really fascinated by that idea.
I do think it's crazier about the possibility of a guy like Simons, for example, going from what he's making now, which he is making a little more than he should, than to the minimum versus like Trent, for example, going from like something similar around like 18-ish a year to the minimum. Because Simons, he's got the high volume 3-point scoring, which like shooting, let's see, just like on average high 30s from three on like 8 to 9 attempts per game in the past few years with Portland. That's a very valuable trait that teams value. Some decent to good, like really good on ball secondary on ball skills. But yeah, really no defensive qualities. And that's kind of where teams are drawing the line now. So someone is going to benefit from this, and that could be why I think it's going to be like a short term type of thing where I I think it's one thing when it's like a smaller guard who doesn't really have quite as much on ball skills like a Gary Trent, but when it's a guy like Simons who like he should not be getting the minimum. He should probably be getting like the full mid level. But I could see it this year like it really being teams going like getting too into the trend that another team's gonna like massively benefit from it. I'm not sure exactly how it'll work, but yeah, I think you're onto something where the Bucks got Brook Lopez for free. Like I was imagine if the Warriors got him instead of signing DeMarcus Cousins. I think they would have probably won another championship or two.
Oh man, I hadn't even thought about that. But what's your prediction that we're etching in stone that we can hold you accountable for? Like, is it Anthony Simons minimum?
I'm just gonna say I want to keep it a bigger pool. Like I know
You
that
gotta
even
no.
with
We have to check if you're right. You have to put something like hard and fast in stone.
I can't.
I'll give you
Okay.
this. How about this?
How about this? How
Anthony
about this?
Simons for
Okay.
tax mid level or less.
How
Is
about
that
this?
fair?
All those three players, they're not going to get more than the tax mid level. Is that fair?
Okay, great. So
Like
the three players
all three of them have to get tax mid level or less for my prediction to
okay.
hit.
Is that
And
Simons,
there's a couple.
Sexton?
I brought up in Cam Thomas. I'm sure there's a bigger
Okay.
pool of players out there. I'm not. There's D'Angelo Russell, but he's going to opt in.
Minimum or opt in. Yeah, like that's we can leave him aside.
Yeah, I'm trying to see who else, but now like everyone else as I go down, they're pretty much minimums as it is. So those are the three
Okay.
guys that I think people would be kind of surprised. I think the general public would be surprised if that happens.
All right, 2 years out on January 1st, 2028, Rob Pelinka will no longer be the general manager of the Los Angeles Lakers. What I think should happen is that Mark Walter, having now taken over the team, I think the sale is now official. They have gotten rid of the successful Bus siblings, Joey and Jesse, who ran the G League and scouting operation. And by the way, did a very good job of it. They're now gone. I think there are fewer and fewer people in the organization that Rob Pelinka can now blame for his many shortcomings. If I were running the Lakers, I would fire him at the end of the season, but that's never the way it plays out. I think he's going to have a disappointing offseason. I think the Lakers, once again, next year are going to be a first or second round team. And then I think he will be let go after that, at which point Mark Walter will throw a 9-figure deal at 9 figures, 100 million plus, right? Whatever that, like some huge amount of cash basically at some experienced GM with another team, like, you know, a Daryl Morey type or like somebody like that who like, you know, will come with more cachet in the way that Andrew Friedman did for the Dodgers when Mark Walter hired him. And by the way, Mark Walter, I believe, buys the Dodgers in 2012 and hires Friedman in 14. So it's like a 2-year gap. And that's what this would be, a 2-season gap between Walter buying the Lakers and fully changing their basketball operations. I think they should do it sooner, but I think this is when it will happen. So my prediction is that by January 1st, 2028, Rob Pelinka will no longer be running the Los Angeles Lakers. Yossi, what say you?
That's a good one. And yeah, I think I agree. Even despite whatever issues I would have with the way he has led the Lakers, just the way these things go, new owner's going to want to get his guys in. And if you look at some of the recent changes of ownership for other teams around the league, never really, I don't recall seeing like something that quickly and aggressive when it came to some type of turnover in the front office. Like, I don't think the Wolves really did anything like that when they sold. I don't
Tim
think the
Connolly. Yes,
Celtics.
they did.
No,
There
no,
were extenuating
I'm
circumstances,
talking
but
about like no. I'm talking about like they hired him, but they didn't like they didn't fire anybody. It was one of those things where okay, this is going to be their guy. They hired him, and then eventually, okay, you might the people that you are putting above them might leave. That's separate. I'm talking about the Lakers straight up. Like very shortly after the sale went through and they took over, they fired an entire segment
department,
of the
yeah.
front office. I don't recall anything quite that aggressive from a new ownership change that quickly. So I think that is a good indication that we are going to see those types of changes in the future. And that would probably mean that eventually, sooner than later, Rob Pelinka probably won't stick around that longer. He did sign that extension, which I
Golden parachute
it
from good buddy Genie.
that's generally like a pretty big indicator that a sale could be coming. That came in between the Luka trade and the announcement of the sale. So I don't think anyone was really thinking that was a golden parachute because he did pull off that Luka trade. So you could see that being some like a fair reward.
I ask
Uh,
this all the time, Yossi. Does Rob Pelinka have any more idiot friends he can trade with? Because if he doesn't, there's not another Luka trade coming.
yeah, I there's a handful of teams he's probably going to try to get a deal done with over the next few years if he's going to keep the job. But look, he got this extension. He'll have had like a 10-year run at least. That's really impressive for being the head of a front office. No, just like anyone. That's an incredible run. It's so hard to keep a job for like even half that time. So no, I think that's just logical what you predicted.
Yeah, I think his shortcomings have really been put on display this year where like JJ Redick is openly talking about we need effort, we need hustle. And it's like every time the scouting department found somebody like that, whether it was Alex Caruso or Scottie Pippen Jr. or Jay Huff or Jordan Goodwin, Rob Pelinka would jettison that guy because we have to get the defensive player of the year from 6 years ago, or the guy who was picked in the lottery 4 years ago who's burned out with 3 teams. Like Rob Pelinka's vision of building a team is just acquiring famous people. And like anybody on Twitter could do that. The Lakers need a greater level of expertise and attention to detail than he has had. And I think they will be better off when they eventually make that change.
So I'll get to mine then. And mine's pretty simple. I think by January 1st, 2028, there will be a second NBA team running a Noah LaRoche type offense. So for those who need some clarification on what that is, last year the Memphis Grizzlies, they brought in a coaching staff featuring a guy named Noah LaRoche, which he implemented a system that pretty much eliminated pick and rolls and had a lot more. So they didn't have to depend on it. It's a lot more ball movement, off ball movement. And the Grizzlies won a lot of regular season games because of it. Ultimately, they let him go because it seemed like John Moran didn't like the system. But either way, now he's on. LaRoche is on the Heat. They've implemented.
Well, wait,
the
let me
system.
stop you. Noah LaRoche technically does not work for the Heat. He consulted with the Heat. He is
Oh, okay.
available to be hired. So that's
Okay.
my thought is
I did
some
not
team is
know
going to
that.
look at what happened in Miami and is going to hire him to their staff. Like I
I
think
could
it's going to
not.
be kind of like a Moneyball Bill James situation where the A's have all the success and then the Red Sox hire Bill James. I don't know the order of operations on 2002
Wow.
baseball. So, but
I can't
you are
believe. I just
I
can't believe I
think
didn't
you are
know that. The way his name keeps
yeah.
getting brought up, you would think he works for them.
Yeah, and by the way, like maybe they go out and they just hire him officially, but like I think this has been enough of a success in Miami that like if he doesn't have a direct job with the Heat right now, I think somebody else is going to hire him because like not everybody has that super point pick and roll dependent guard like John Morant. And by the way, there are people in Memphis like who were part of last year's staff that like might have liked that offense. And maybe when John Morant is gone, if they do trade him, they say maybe we start to go back to some of these principles. So it might even
Yep.
be 3 teams.
Yeah. So now the Heat, they're implementing the offense, and it's still kind of early. The early returns were pretty good. They stumbled in December. Now I think they're on a 4-game winning streak as of this recording. Yeah, they won 4 in a row. So picking back up, but the early returns are pretty good. That this is a good system at the very least for winning regular season games. Whether this can translate well into the playoffs, I think it's going to take time for us to know. But I don't. I think if you there's you I do think there is and I want to know your opinion on it, but I do feel like maybe there is a way that teams can implement different strategies for winning regular season games and then for the playoffs, because the Heat have always in recent years been a team where there is no cap on how far they can go in the playoffs. They just need to get in, but getting in has been a problem for them. And I think deep down, like, yeah, they had that 2023 run where they went to the finals as an 8 seed, but I think they wish they were a higher seed ultimately in all these other years because they maybe would have won a championship. Historically, only like seeds 1 through 3 win a championship. So now they're in a much better footing than in most years to make the playoffs. But yeah, once you get into the playoffs, maybe you actually then start to switch things up because maybe you do want to focus more on pick and rolls, because once you get into the playoffs, it's all about creating advantages. So what do you think? Do you think there could be a balance between implementing this type of offense to try to not only win more regular season games, but also run a system that's more sustainable to just be a little more consistent throughout the regular season and then be able to change things up in the playoffs?
So we're going to do an episode at some point about roster building trends in general. And something that's been very interesting to me is that this season has kind of been maybe not the death knell to heliocentrism, but certainly we have a lot less ball screens. We have a lot less like high usage individual players monopolizing offenses. I think it's going to be a very team to team thing. Something that we've seen this year as a league in the league as a whole is there is just a lot more diversity of winning, where you have teams like Houston and the Knicks who get all these offensive rebounds and win by bludgeoning you. But then there are also teams that win by playing smaller and having all of this shooting. And like there are just a lot of different ways teams are winning this year. It doesn't feel like it felt when the Warriors were at their peak, where the Warriors had kind of cracked the code and figured out basketball. This is the way things are going to be moving forward. I think it's going to much more be about how can we play in ways that cater to our teams. And if you have a team that doesn't have a heliocentric pick and roll point guard, it might make sense for you to play this way. If you do have that guy, maybe it doesn't. And most teams will probably fall somewhere in between, where like nobody runs the triangle anymore, or really very few teams ever actually have run the triangle that were not directly coached by Phil Jackson or a Phil Jackson acolyte. But there are a lot of principles from the triangle that have persisted today. Steve Kerr uses a lot of triangle principles, especially when it comes to post entry passes. And he's talked about that a lot, about how you can integrate these ideas from older offenses and then sort of remix and reapply them to modern principles. I think there are going to be things like that where teams take, like, one of the big principles of this Noah LaRoche offense, it's drive and relocate, right? Like the guy who has the ball makes the decision very quickly to drive, and then somebody relocates into the driver's spot and somebody else relocates into his spot. It's sort of a wheel, the way that it operates. I think that there are going to be different sorts of ways that teams sort of take that idea and remix it and reapply it to the talent that they have. And how can you use that to keep a defense in rotation? I think that's going to be something that we really see teams innovate with over the next few years in the way that they did with pick and roll, right? Like Jerry Sloan's pick and roll in Utah and Mike D'Antoni's pick and roll in Houston were very, very different things. And I think what ultimately happened with pick and roll, I don't want to say defenses figured it out because pick and roll is too complicated to say like, oh, this is the antidote to that. But like teams now have the personnel to switch much more than they used to. There are bigs that are much more capable of defending on the perimeter, not just in switch, but in high hedge and in blitz and all of these different sorts of ways where the advantage you got, where like in 2015, Stephen Curry is going to call for a screen 30 feet from the basket. And oh no, giant center 30 feet from the basket. He's useless. Steph is going to blow by him, or they're going to blitz Steph, and that's going to give Draymond the 4-on-3. Like defenses have figured out how to adjust to that. So a lot of the advantages that came with pick and roll started to get less and less and less. And I think sort of the same thing happened with shot selection, where there was a time, especially Daryl Morey's time in Houston, where you generated this huge expected advantage just by taking the right shots, by taking more layups and by taking more threes. Like your average shot quality was so much higher that even if you were a worse shooting team, you would go into games with a 3, 4, 5 point advantage. I think now average shot quality in the NBA has gotten so much higher because all of the mid-range shots are gone that effectively shot selection is no longer an advantage. So that's why you've seen so many teams pivot into, can we get a lot of offensive rebounds? Can we adjust to playing that way? Can we generate more turnovers on defense? Oklahoma City has been at the forefront of that because there isn't this advantage with shot selection anymore. Therefore, you have to create the advantage through the possession game. That's kind of the beauty of basketball. It's a constantly changing battlefield where different things become prioritized as different adjustments are made to the schemes that are being applied and the players that are in the league at a given time. So I was not expecting to go on this specific rant today, but I do think you're right. I do think this is something that's going to become more popular. Do I think we're going to have 20 teams running the Noah LaRoche offense as a base? No. Do I think we could have 4 or 5 teams doing it, but 10 to 15 other teams finding new ways to apply these principles? Absolutely.
So what sounds like you're pretty convinced there's going to be more than 2 teams. What do you think the
Yes.
number could be then?
Well, I'll
by
say this.
2 years from now.
2 years from now, I don't think John Morant is going to be on the Grizzlies, and I think they're going to be doing a lot more of this stuff. And I think Noah LaRoche will directly be on somebody's coaching staff, and frankly, maybe even on track to eventually be a head coach someday. So I don't want to give an exact prediction, but I'll say I think more than 2.
Maybe 5, 6 at least.
4, 5, 6, something in that range. But again, I think there's a big difference between the teams that are just flat out running it, where you're doing like 10 ball screens per 100 possessions like the Heat are, versus teams that may be running some pick and roll, but are also taking bits and pieces of this offense that they like that apply to the players that they have and like mixing that in and kind of remixing it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I guess I went a little too low on this. Seems like we're pretty much agreement. It's going to be like kind of a certainty. And again, well, how the Heat progress over the next 2 months will really determine that. But I think it's looking like a viable way to go about your regular season at the very least.
All right, within 3 years, on January 1st, 2029, Anthony Edwards will either have an MVP trophy or he will be the betting favorite for the 2029 MVP. I think this for a few reasons. Number one, we see this time and time again. MVPs kind of come in cycles, right? Where now it's kind of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's time, and it was Jokic's before that, and it was Giannis's before that. You kind of have a 3, 4, 5 year window where your team is good enough and you're good enough and you're healthy enough that you're winning MVP. And right now is SGA's time. I think Ant is going to be up next because I don't trust Victor Wembanyama to stay healthy. The other thing about Anthony Edwards that I just think we should talk about, I feel like he makes the exact improvement that he needs to make in his game. Maybe not every year, but every stage of his development. So what was the concern with him coming into the NBA through the draft? Oh, does he care enough? Is he going to work hard enough? He's kind of a funny, relaxed kind of guy. Doesn't take basketball super seriously. Do we think he's going to defend super hard being that kind of guy? Well, we see right out of the gate, like, no, he plays so hard. He defends really hard. He buys into the team system. But is he just an athlete? Is he going to be a good enough three-point shooter? We see this last year. He, I think, leads the league in made three-pointers, takes over 10 a game. Great, makes them an elite clip. But he's given up the mid-range game. Is he just like getting to the rim and making threes? This year, he's improved substantially as a mid-range shot maker. I feel like his game just continues to get rounded out every year to the point where, like, 1 or 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to have the season where just everything clicks and he's on the right team, whether that's Minnesota or somebody else. That's another conversation. Like, maybe the Timberwolves get the roster right, or maybe he's been traded to a better team, or whatever it is, where it's just from start to finish, it's going to be the year of Anthony Edwards. I think, like, it might not happen until 2029. So that's why I worked it in where, like, maybe on January 1st, 2029, he is the betting favorite for the 2029 MVP, but I think it is going to happen.
I'm with you. When we did our draft to select players we want to sort of franchise with, I took Edwards with my second round pick, and I made that pick with the caveat that I think Edwards will win an MVP one year. It won't be this year in all likelihood, although with the way injuries are happening,
we're one Shai Gilgeous-Alexander injury
yeah.
away from a really interesting MVP conversation.
Which, look, an MVP is an MVP. I think there's a very high likelihood he will win an MVP within the next 3 years. So I think you're on to something. If you want to play it safe, it feels like 2029 might be the year, just with maybe some of these current guys like Jokic, Giannis, might age out sort of a little bit towards from being a top 3 player, maybe closer to top 7 to 8. Like, as you look to see who else can really challenge Edwards, there's guys like Cade on the come up. It's hard to like project that far out, but I think Edwards is in pole position to win an MVP soon. So yes,
let me add 2 points to this. Let me add 2 points. So since LeBron in 2012, every MVP has been between the ages of 24 and 28. The 2028-29 season will be Anthony Edwards' age 28 season. So this is his entire MVP window by that logic. So starting this year through the 2028-29 season, that's the theoretical MVP window based on recent history. The other thing is, Anthony Edwards' contract currently expires after the 2028-29 season. So one of two things happens. Either he's still on the Timberwolves at that point, at which point you assume they've probably done a good job of building their roster, or the Timberwolves haven't done a good job of building their roster, and Edwards forces a trade. And we know that the MVP award loves rewarding guys in new situations. I think back to Charles Barkley in 1993, 94, 93, when he goes to Phoenix and he beats Michael Jordan. So I could see a situation where we get to 2028 and, like, Anthony Edwards gets traded to Houston. And even though Wemby is the best player in the NBA, Edwards is the story of the season. He goes to the Rockets. They look like a championship contender, and that's how he gets his MVP. So just 2 things to add to kind of support my case.
All right. No, I'm with you. I don't really have too much to add there. So let's go with mine. This is the last one. This one is somewhat of a hot take. I think a lot of people are absolutely not going to agree with me on this. But as we know, you know how every so often the NBA is thinking about implementing some kind of rule change, or they're thinking about doing some big project, like the NBA is considering whether it's expansion or starting this Euro League. And here's what the timeline is. You get the reports with all those details. We just had the NBA release how they are looking to curb tanking, and here's what all these things they're thinking about implementing to try to reinforce that. You and I had an episode about that, I think 2 weeks ago, going over that stuff. So my prediction is that by January 1st, 2029, we'll have had that type of report about the NBA looking into shortening the season. And I already know a lot of you are thinking there's no way they're going to look into shortening the season. But Sam, you talked about this on Twitter recently really well, just about how the NBA's played so much differently. It's played so much harder. Players are required to exert so much more energy on both ends on the court, way more than previous generations have. And because the game was much slower, everyone's posting up, playing more ISO back then. Okay, you could do 82 games of that, and a lot of guys, they didn't miss a beat. But now we're starting to see the result of 82 games, or even just like the pressure required to play that long in an 82 game season, what that's doing to the players' bodies. It's hard for them to sustain, and the NBA's answer for that so far is, okay, well, let's make the players want to play more, because in the past few years the idea was load management. The NBA wants to, they have this position that they were absolutely wrong about load management. It doesn't prove anything. I think we're starting to see that load management is actually kind of right based on some of the injuries going on recently. But you and I are in agreement that the demands of the NBA are so much more demanding that I think the NBA has to stop going around the issue. And I think over the next few years, they're going to have to actually face the reality that they're going to have to look into shorting the season if they're going to not only solve this injury crisis going on, all these calf issues leading to Achilles tears and all sorts of other injuries, but I do think it would help a lot of their other issues around the league as well. I talked about this when we discussed the tanking issues. Before I get into how that might be, do you have any thoughts on what I've said so far?
Clear the lane. I've got a lot to say.
Okay.
These soft tissue injuries are an existential threat to the NBA. I don't think that they fully recognize that yet. But do you realize we lost 3 superstars all season to torn Achilles last postseason? Can you imagine if that happens again? Like, what does it mean?
Hold on. Time out. This basically happened in 2021-22, where they rushed the NBA back post-COVID to play the 66-game season. And so many star players broke down in the playoffs that 21-22, like, that's kind of a lost season for the league. So many guys got torn Achilles, torn ACL. They just missed the entire following season. A lot of that may have had to do, I think it had to do with the nature of how the league came back. So it's happened before, and it's happening again right now.
The Bucks-Suns finals was a very fun series. It was also between the 5th and 6th best teams in the NBA. We never talk about this, but the Lakers, the Clippers, the Nets, and the Nuggets were all better than both of those teams and were just killed by injuries. But I look back at losing Halliburton, Tatum, and Lillard during the playoffs last year for all of this season. Let's say that happens again. Let's say during the 2026 postseason, Kevin Durant, Victor Wembanyama, and Chet Holmgren all tear Achilles. Do you recognize what a catastrophe that would be for the NBA next year? These soft tissue injuries are like truly an existential threat to the league. They knock players out for a whole year at a time. Do you know how much damage that does to the TV partners, where you can't put these marquee teams on their national broadcasts? Like, that's a huge, huge threat to the league. We go through these phony studies now every few years where it's like, well, actually, the NBA has found there aren't more injuries, or the NBA has found the load management doesn't actually help. I'm going to make this very, very, very simple. Do you want to know how I know that there would be fewer injuries if you played 65 games versus if you played 82? It's because if you play 82 games, that's 82 opportunities to get hurt. If you play 65 games, that's 65 opportunities to get hurt. And I know people are going to be like, oh, well, they just get hurt in the next game or whatever. I don't know if the actual, I don't know if the rest is going to stop these soft tissue injuries. I'm inclined to believe they would, but I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you that definitively. All I know is, like, if you have 17 fewer chances to land awkwardly and tear your ACL, there are going to be guys who are healthy in the playoffs that wouldn't have been because they didn't take that awkward fall, or they didn't have to rush back from the sprained ankle where they're favoring their other leg, and then suddenly they, stretch their MCL or whatever. Like,
fewer back-to-backs too.
You can eliminate back-to-backs altogether. I just think it's such a simple way to to deal with so many problems in the league. You've talked about the tanking issue. I wrote a big story about the 65 game limit, by the way, on TBS Sports. You can go read that. But basically what happened was the NBA was negotiating their new national TV deal, which was going to kick in this season, 25-26. They were negotiating it first and foremost. Like, the main negotiation period was during the 2023-24 season. That's when they implemented the 65 game rule. Do you know what happened between the 2021 and 2022 seasons, or the 2020, yeah, 21 22, 22 23 seasons? Of the 30 players who made all NBA teams in that window, 9 of them played less than 65 games. And I think the NBA looked at that as a crisis. Like, we need to incentivize these guys to play hard, like to play more games, because we need our new potential TV partners to know that if you pay to air LeBron James games, LeBron James is going to appear in those games. LeBron James is not going to change his health regimen for the sake of playing in more games. The dude's 41. Like, that ship has sailed. All they really did was make it harder for injury prone guys and older players to make all NBA, even though we know they should, right? Like, it's kind of a farce if Nikola Jokic plays 62 games and he can't make all NBA. How is that a snapshot of the season? How is that an accurate reflection of the basketball that we watch? You know who is affected? And by the way, he admitted it. You have guys like Tyrese Halliburton, who was playing like an MVP the first 2-3 months of the 24-25 season. Or no, excuse me, during the first few months of the 23-24 season. He hurts his hamstring. He misses 5 games, comes back for a game, misses 5 more. He has to come back to get his Supermax eligibility, or his Rose Rule eligibility, I guess, the 30% max. He even admitted on JJ Redick's podcast, like, if I didn't have that incentive to come back for my contractual gain, I might have rested a few more games. And he wasn't the same player the rest of that season. And he started slowly the next year. Like, this stuff all compounds. I don't think the NBA appreciates really, like, enough that what actually matters is having guys healthy when April, May, and June roll around. That's when memories are made. That's when lifelong attachment to teams and players is formed. That's when, like, the games actually matter. But while we're on this topic, if you play fewer regular season games, each of those regular season games is going to matter more. There's a financial element of this at stake there as well. I would argue that if you decrease supply of games, demand increases, and you can suddenly start charging more for ads. Yeah. You can charge more for tickets. You can charge more. You can generate more revenue per game by acting that way. Now, again, it would be a short-term hit. You'd have to find ways to make players whole because they don't have the long-term equity to weather that storm in the way that owners would. But I think there are ways that you could do that.
So I'm going to address that point that you just said. But before I get into that, can I make an honorary 1-year prediction? Not an honorable mention 1-year prediction. You know how back in school, high school, middle school, if all the students did really bad on the tests, there was that curve, brought down the average, whatever it is. Like, what if the NBA does that to preserve the sanctity of all NBA, where if all of Jokic and Wemby and Giannis, like, if they all ended up playing 60 games, what if they decide to bring down the average just for this year? They bring the curve down to, I don't know, 58 games, something like that.
Well, it's weird because 58 is the eligibility marker for the scoring championship and the assist championship and the rebound championship. Why do we have different markers? It's explicitly because they were negotiating a TV deal. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, whatever the exact phrasing is, I haven't been in school for a long time. They'll change the curve, or there will be a curve. Let's see. I wouldn't be shocked if the NBA does something like that. But number one, let's talk about the actual games. The thing that I noted about the way the NBA went about, one, their marker for game award eligibility, and then their marker for what they want the cutoff to be for your wins and losses, counting towards the reverse standings for the lottery. It's roughly 60 to 65 games. 65 games is a requirement to win awards. 60 games is where March 1st usually is. Most teams will play 60 games. So I think that's kind of like the spot that it feels like universally understood that that's what an NBA season with the way basketball is played should probably land at. Now, the NBA can't just reduce their season by 20 games per team. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of financial elements. Now, I'm not a financial expert. I'm a cap expert. I don't work in the NBA for their BRI. I don't know how that stuff is. That sounds like way more complicated than learning the cap could ever, than learning the cap. But what if there's something like a 10-year plan where each season the NBA reduces the amount of games each team plays by like 2 years? So you go from 82 to 80, so on, so on, so on. So eventually get to somewhere between 60 to 65 games. So the idea is that you have more time to recalibrate the revenue. You were talking about how you can try to charge more for games, the rights, all that stuff. So if there's a way that they can implement that over time, then I think then it just starts to make sense for everybody. If you don't lose that, if you're able to not lose money, but at the more realistically, just really hinder how much you're going to lose, then this can all work. I don't. Again, this is more just wishful thinking at this point, but I'm just trying to put it down something, somewhat of a structure that might actually work in the long run. So will we get it? Probably not, but I do predict that within the next 3 years, we're gonna have that type of report that the NBA is looking into it. That's it. That's the most we will probably get. They'll look into it. They're gonna, so then maybe eventually they could say no, it's not viable, but I think it's viable. You and I think it should be viable. And I do think like at some point the NBA will at the very least just need to address it because they cannot it's bordering on just lying to us. Like, come on. We know
I have
the
one
truth.
more thing. One more thing I want to add, and then I want to just quickly go through my backup predictions. But something to keep an eye on right now is the collapse of the RSN model and kind of what's going to happen to local TV rights, because there's some chatter going around that like maybe the NBA is going to have to pool the local TV rights for most of the teams. Not every team is going to be on board with this. The Knicks certainly wouldn't, because they hate NBA socialism. That's another conversation. And the Lakers make so much from their local TV deal that it would be very hard to get them on board with that. But like, if you are pooling local TV and doing that all through League Pass or some similar mechanism, that makes it a lot easier to do something like this, because you don't have something that happened during the bubble was the reason they had to bring so many teams, was one of the reasons anyway, was that so many teams had clauses in their local TV deals that they had to play a certain number of games in order to satisfy the contracts. And if all the league is pulling together all these different teams, it makes it a lot easier to address all of that stuff. But I want to quickly, before I have to head out, I want to go through my backup predictions, and we don't have to have real conversations about these, but in case you had overlapped with me in any, I did have backups. So let me just go through my three. Within 1 year, the NBA will announce one expansion team and not two. I think they will announce a Vegas team. I think they're going to go through all of this process. And then I think they're going to relocate a team to Seattle or vice versa. I think what they want is a team in Vegas and Seattle, but they only want to expand by one team so they can force the best possible bidding war for the expansion fee. And then somebody's going to buy the Pelicans and move them. That's my backup 1 year prediction. What do you think?
1 year?
Announced in summer of 26.
I think that's more of a 2 or 3 year thing because expansion
Okay.
ships just keeps getting pushed and pushed and pushed.
Adam
I
Silver
would
said they
say
were going to address it this year.
I would say relocation is probably more likely because all it takes is selling to someone who just wants to move the team. It's as simple as that. That like but
Pelicans. You're
we
thinking
don't
of the Pelicans.
like it feels like unless they sell to someone also New Orleans based, that's like the only thing keeping them there. But anyway, that's enough of that. I would say the relocation is more likely. Any what else do you have?
Yeah, to be clear, I'm saying I don't think they're going to announce teams 31 and 32. I think they're going to announce team 31, and maybe they'll get to 32 later. But anyway, within 2 years, on January 1st, 2028, Chris Paul will be the minority owner and shadow general manager of an NBA team.
I don't know about that. I mean, I've never thought that far about what Chris Paul would be doing. I thought he'd be more like getting into media. Maybe I feel like he's got that.
He might. I feel like he has such competitive spirit, and he's so well regarded, not only like by the other players, but by the league as a whole, that I think somebody's going to bring him into an ownership group, and we're going to get the big report in The Athletic about like, Chris Paul really has the owner's ear, and he's been talking about ways they need to change the culture, and he was a big driver of so-and-so move.
He'll have his options, but I have actually considered him. I've never considered him being a front office guy. I thought maybe he could be a coach. I think he could be a coach.
I thought the Knicks would think about him during their search last year because of his close connection with Leon Rose.
Yeah, I would say for him, seems like first, if he can get a nice cushy media job, then coaching, and then the front office stuff would probably come after like lots of coaching. It feels like.
Yeah. I think he's going to want to stay in LA for the time being, which is why the minority owner shadow GM makes the most sense. Where like, oh, Chris Paul's whispering in Vivek's ear. Chris Paul is a lot smarter than Vlade Divac, like something like that. Within 3 years, and this is one I think we both just agree on, but it's like worth the prediction because their fans won't, or fans in that city won't. The Nets will be the best team in New York. Do you agree?
In 3 years?
Yeah, by January 1st, 2029, the Brooklyn Nets will be the best team in New York.
Yeah, that's definitely reasonable. Because in 3 years from now, I think the most of the guys on the Knicks will be like 32, 33. If they haven't moved those guys by now, it's reasonable. It's definitely up
Yeah.
there. I would say like slight chance, like more likely, yeah, but not by too much. I could still see the Knicks being pretty good 3 years from now, but
Yeah.
the Nets should be pretty good by then as well.
We've talked a lot about the Knicks salary window, where basically they're set up to go over to the second apron next year, stay there for 2 years, and then you have to kind of reconsider. 2029 is the first year out of that window of second apron years. So that's part of that motivation. But I also just think, the Nets, their young guys will start to mature. They'll use their cap space. I think they have a smart front office. So I think they'll be able to get on the right track. And I think they'll be pretty good by 2029.
All right, Sam. So
Yep.
we are done for this. So today is January 2nd. Probably have this up on the 4th. Anything you want us to keep an eye on?
Just read cbssports.com. My exhaustive trade deadline coverage will all be there. And we really kick into gear starting next week. We've got the month-long push until the deadline. So all of my stuff will be there and here on Third Apron Podcast. So listen to the podcast, read CBS Sports.
Yeah, listen, subscribe to the podcast. Me and Sam are going to be very active this month. This is already our third or fourth thing of the week. I don't know. I've lost count. Subscribe to the newsletter on Substack. I've been active there. Talked about the Cavs. Talked about the Nuggets and Nets and the Michael Porter Jr. trade. Revisited that. Eventually, I'll get into a bigger part 2 trade deadline once we hear more rumors, more reports on who else is going to be available. So be on the lookout for that. And we will be back this week at some point. Thanks, everybody.